Alright, this video is relevant to anyone that's studying the A-level history course for the Edexcel exam board and is within history studying the topic of the USSR. So that's from Lenin to Yeltsin 1917 to 1985. And this video specifically is just going to focus on theme 3. So theme 3 only, okay, which is control of the people. So yeah, the control over the media, propaganda, religion from 1917 to 1985. The USSR was a totalitarian state where the Communist Party maintained tight control over nearly every aspect of the public and private life. I'm going to explore, how the media used propaganda, the role of personality cults, the suppression of religion, and the operations of the secret police to control Soviet society. Okay, so first, state control of mass media and propaganda. The control of media in the Soviet Union became almost immediately after the Bolsheviks seized power. In November 1917, all non-socialist newspapers were banned, and by the 1920s, even non-Bolshevik socialist papers were shut down. The printing press was nationalized, and all editors and journalists were required to be members of the Communist Party. Every publication had to receive approval from the censorship office, known as the Glavlit, before printing. The main newspapers were Pravda and Izvestia, both of which served as tools of propaganda. These newspapers focused on installing party values and celebrating Soviet achievements, while topics such as government failures and natural disasters were strictly prohibited. Local newspapers were allowed to criticize local officials, but never party leaders. Magazines were targeted at specific audiences, like farmers, soldiers, and teachers. Content related to sex, crime, or religion was banned, although they did give some accurate coverage of sports. Radio was another important medium to look at. It was also, used to manipulate and had no tradition of independence before, being a new development. Instead of music, radio mostly featured news and propaganda. Radios were expensive, so loudspeakers were installed in public spaces to ensure mass participation and to indoctrinate the illiterate population. Radio also allowed for quick communication. New apartment blocks were wired to receive only government-run stations. Until 1964, there was only one Soviet radio station, and Brezhnev later increased this to 3. Foreign radio stations were restricted as they posed a threat to compliance. Television emerged as a powerful tool from the 1950s, and it became a key method of propaganda, highlighting the achievements of socialism while also portraying life under capitalism as bleak. However, the programming failed to excite the public, but by 1985 there was still only 2 channels. Programs were broadcast in local languages to improve accessibility. So yeah, in summary, media control helped ensure conformity and indoctrination. However, over time, the population learned to read between the lines and interpret shifts in political favour. So next up, we have part of this topic is the personality cults of Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev. So cult of personality was essentially used to reinforce the power of the leader and encourage loyalty and conformity. It helped to raise the leader above collective leadership and portrayed them as a legitimate successor to Lenin, who was presented as a heroic founder of the regime. So Stalin, his personality cult was perhaps the most extreme. He was linked to Lenin, presented himself to be his closest friend and a hero of the Civil War. In 1925, the town of Tsarskoye was renamed Stalingrad. After Lenin's death, the slogan "Stalin is the Lenin of today" was circulated. From the 1930s, imagery was reinforcing his power, portraying him as godlike. He was shown as a father figure, a military hero, a humble worker, and his official biography was written to exaggerate his role in the revolution. He collected many grand titles, and poets and filmmakers glorified him. Statues were erected, and speeches were widely distributed. By the 1940s, the cult had become completely divorced from his real personality. By the 1950s, many towns were named after him. While some of his cult was artificial, many citizens generally respected Stalin as a benefactor, even his critics. Khrushchev publicly criticized Stalin and his cult within his 1956 secret speech, which helped him promote de-Stalinization. But still, Khrushchev developed his own cult to consolidate power, especially as he initially shared leadership with Malenkov. He staged photo opportunities with peasants and appointed his son-in-law as editor of the Izvestia magazine to promote his image. He used radio, cinema, and television to highlight his successes. And while maybe his personality cult was not extensive as Stalin's, Khrushchev's cult contributed to his eventual dismissal. Brezhnev used his cult to rise from the power struggle that formed after Khrushchev's death. It gave him the appearance of power, even when he wasn't necessarily exercising it. He awarded himself numerous medals and retained popularity. His cult also masked his declining health. Overall, cults provided a unifying figure during the crisis in the 1930s, the war, and left a cultural gap by religion as well. So this echoed traditional Russian leadership and made it easier for the population to identify with the state. Okay, so it should be mentioned that Brezhnev also had a program installed called Trust under Cadres, which is emphasizing that his personality cult was actually based on other leaders taking initiatives of their own policies rather than being all centralized by just the one authoritarian figure or leader. So moving on to the next section is attacks on religion. Okay, so the Russian Orthodox Church posed a threat to Marxism, which prioritized collective identity over individual faith. The Bolsheviks, particularly Lenin, were atheists. Religion had historically helped the Tsars maintain control, so it was systemically targeted. From 1918, the Church of Milosland publications and the right to teach religion outside of the home, and churches were destroyed or repurposed. The church's leader was placed under house arrest. During the Civil War, church property was seized to pay for food. Priests were denied the vote and targeted in the Red Terror. In 1929, the League of the Militant Godless was created to disprove God's existence, and religious rituals were mocked. These measures were limited the church's power, but didn't eradicate it, especially in rural areas. Under Stalin, priests were labelled as kulaks during collectivization. The Great Purge from 1936 to 1939 saw further attacks. However, during the World War II, Stalin softened policies as the church supported the war effort. Khrushchev, however, was extremely anti-religious. His campaign from 1958 to 1964 reduced priests' roles in giving spiritual advice only, and had no real power. Parish councils were placed under party control, and surviving clergy were harassed by the secret police. Baptists and Jews also faced restrictions. So, under Brezhnev, persecution declined to avoid damaging foreign relations. The Council of Religious Affairs monitored services, expecting the church to support the state. In 1976, a religious dissident group was shut down, and Baptists and Jews remained less tolerated due to their criticism of the regime. So Brezhnev wanted to uphold religion to some sense within the Soviet Union. He wanted to have that kind of good image, I guess, with foreign relations, especially the height of the Cold War as well. Islam, particularly in Central Asia, did also pose a direct challenge to its integration into daily life. Early on, Islam was largely left alone, and however, by the mid-1920s, religious land endowments were banned, and traditional practices like Ramadan were condemned. These policies caused revolts and were ultimately crushed by the Red Army. So it's important to look at the relationship between Islam and the USSR. Okay, so next section we have the secret police from 1917 to 1985. Secret police were essential to state control. The Cheka was formed in 1917 to counter revolutionaries. During the Civil War, its powers increased, and after its assassination attempt on Lenin, arrests intensified. During the Red Terror of 1921 to 22, attacks on socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks occurred. The police went through many changes, known as the GPU in 1922, OGPU in 1923, and the NKVD in 1934, and finally later the KGB, which was from 1954 onwards. So that was just after Stalin's death. These changes marked increasing independence and scope. The 5-year plans revealed new enemies like kulaks, Nepmen, who were sent to gulags. Show trials and political denunciations became common. This can be seen for the Trial of the 16, 1936, Trial of the 37, Trial of 17, 1937, and Trial of 21 in 1938. And victims were often tortured into confessing within these trials. Yagoda, appointed in 1934, was enthusiastic and aimed to please Stalin. He expanded the gulags, which supplied slave labour for industrialization. He oversaw projects like the White Sea Canal, which completed, was only completed at a great human cost, and had a little utility in the end. He was removed for failing to protect Kirov and executed in 1938. So next up, Yezhov. He was known as a bloody dwarf. Intensified purges. Arrests and executions increased. He set quotas for killings and expanded surveillance. Even the NKVD purged under his leadership. He was blamed for the excesses and dismissed eventually in 1938. Beria, a calculating figure, focused on efficiency. He required real evidence for arrests and reformed the gulags for productivity. He cancelled early releases and oversaw Trotsky's assassination, and the gulags reached their largest kind of size under Beria. Beria as a person himself had a lot of other factors that perhaps were not as, showed him to not be a good person really at all. I'd say under his leadership related to the secret police, he did bring in some reforms. During World War II, the secret police gained more power. In 1941, they supervised the Red Army and deported national minorities. Beria formed SMERSH, so that's SMERSH, to root out traitors, and Soviet prisoners were persecuted. And after the war, Stalin grew paranoid. Beria launched purges to stay in favour, but Stalin began targeting Beria's ethnicity. The Doctor's plot may have signalled plans to purge him, but Stalin's death in 1933 came before he could even do that. Beria swiftly moved in, and his power was immense. After Beria, the secret police became the KGB under party control. The Gulag system was dismantled and no longer used in the economy. Stalin personally oversaw many aspects of terror. He signed death warrants, set quotas, and viewed forced labour as essential to rapid industrialisation. Although secret police leaders implemented the terror, they had little autonomy. And from 1967, under Andropov, the KGB shifted to dissidents. This included people like nationals, intellectuals, religious believers, Soviet Jews as well, which are also known as refuseniks. They were monitored, harassed, and often arrested. Some were sent to psychiatric hospitals and exiled internally or externally. A 1960 criminal code gave courts more power over arrests, but dissidents were still held back by the political prisoner label. Dissidents had little popular support but damaged the USSR's internal damage. Andropov's efforts kept them small and divided. So from 1982 to 1985, Andropov continued surveillance. He feared economic discontent more than political dissent, and he tried to improve efficiency and living standards. He cracked down on absenteeism and alcoholism. Spot checks upset many, especially women who were waiting in food queues, and despite this, he recognised the problem of gerontoxy and he saw the need for reform. So in conclusion, before the conclusion, I have some key statistics that you may need to know for this topic. It would be good to kind of memorize these, so you can use them in the exam. Okay, so first up we have 1983, the Pravda, which was a publication within the USSR, had circulation of 10.7 million, and in 1950, 10,000 TVs, but in 1958 there was only 3 million. Okay, so 10,000 TVs in 1950, 1958, 3 million TVs, so it's a big increase. By 1930, 80% of all churches destroyed or not operating. By 1980s, 25% of population believed in God. And from 1937 to 40, 2.5 billion ruble growth in Gulag economic activity. Okay, so in conclusion now, Soviet state maintained control for an extensive network of media control, propaganda, personality goals for suppression of religion and secret police activity. From 1917 to 85, each leader adapted these tools to serve their own needs. Okay, so whilst propaganda glorified these leaders in religion, leaders in socialism, censorship and repression silenced dissidents, religion was undermined but not destroyed. The secret police evolved from mass terror under Stalin's target surveillance under Andropov. Though these methods create a facade of unity and stability, they also expose underlying fragility of the Soviet system. Okay, so that's everything for this theme that you really need to know, the key points. Hopefully that helped.